And first of all, I would like to welcome Alex, who's the Group Chief Strategy Officer with VEON. Alex, welcome.
Well, first of all, let me thank you, Annie, for introduction, and thanks to Telecoms Europe for inviting me to this event. As you can see, my name is Alex Kazbegi. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at VEON. We are a global emerging market telecom company present in 9 countries across CIS, Asia, and also Africa. Now, today I will be giving a bit of a different maybe perspective on the growth because we are still operating in the markets where the S-curve of many, so to say, services or growth which has been exhausted in the developed market has not been quite exhausted so in emerging markets. So it could be looking back a bit how the growth looked before, but also trying to find out what were the learnings from the developed market where when operators, I think, were busy looking very much and building the best possible networks and allowing at the same time the OTT players to develop products and services. So we're trying to at least play that game as well, and we think that that's the opportunity probably which we have, at least in emerging markets, to still continue this growth pattern, if you wish. So if we go to the next slide, where I would like to start the journey is by way of the background. I mean, I've worked in capital markets for a while, so I'd like to look at the stock market and look what does it tell us. And you know, as the saying goes, the market is always right. So what the market tells us here, and the bars here are representing the valuation by the investors. So the value which investors attribute to specific sectors or the stocks. It is expressed in something which is called enterprise value over the EBITDA, but it's a unique and homogeneous across the all sectors presented here. On the very right-hand side, you see the S&P, so it's a broader market index. And on the left-hand side in blue, this is the integrated telecom operators. And one message here is very clear. The investors attribute the lowest value to the integrated telecom operators, not only among the S&P, but also even within the segment, which can be further dissected between the tower companies and other infrastructure, and of course, digital. Moreover, if you compare the 2 adjacent bars, you can also see that over the past 5 years, this value actually continued to come down for the integrated telcos, and actually came down even after the COVID, which is, I would say, a bit probably unexpected because the telcos are fairly defensive and actually performed largely well against this old pandemic. But you could also see that on the right-hand side, all the other sectors at the same time continued to increase in the value in at least investor eyes. Now, if we go to the next page, on the right-hand side, you can see what these low values in addition bring is that if you are an investor into the stock market, the 10-year growth, which the US telco sector, and that's a composite index, produced, was less than a half of what the, so to say, Dow Jones Industrial or a broad S&P index produced. And if you compare to global tech, of course, it was even a third of it annualized, which means that compounded, these numbers will be very, very different, and the gap will be even bigger. And what drives that underperformance and the view from the investors why the telco sector is so unappealing, both from the value-wise and from the investor perspective, is exactly the chart on the left-hand side, which shows, and that's the topic for today, where does the telecom growth come from? Europe, you could see, returned actually a negative growth. The world, hardly anything more than like 1.5%, pretty pedestrian. The only continent, only geographical area which continued to grow, at least for the past 10 years, was actually Africa. But overall, the growth is definitely not there, and that is reflected in the valuation. So if we go to the next page, that's a bit of a macro, just a very broad macro perspective as well. In terms of the overall spending on the telecom services, there has been an unabated trend that the spending as a percentage of disposable income is coming down. The two probably criteria here, one, of course, is that the price competition still continues. and that of course drives the overall services. If you the price is lower, but the second thing is of course the substitution. So some of the money which has been before collected by the telco companies is now of course gone to the OTT players, and that of course drives this whole so to say the ratio of how much we spend on telecom services even lower, despite the fact that at the same time the overall consumption of the telecom services and especially the data has probably gone through the roof. Now, turning to our market, so if we go to the next page, as I said, VEON operates in 9 countries with about exposure to total population of 660 million people. It's a massive market, so to say, overall, but it's quite inhomogeneous. The markets, I mean, you can see here that the differences here are not only the macroeconomic, but also demographic, urban, and in terms of the development of the telecom sector. For instance, we operate in market like Russia, which is largely probably closer to the developed markets in terms of its overall profile. And that's a fairly aged population, fairly urban, well-developed telco services. The fixed line infrastructure is well developed in Russia. On the other spectrum, you will have countries like Bangladesh and Pakistan, which have massive amount of population, mostly rural. More than 50% of population is under 30, and that clearly is one of the bigger drivers of the growth for us. And it's pretty much mobile only. There's hardly any fixed line infrastructure to be talked about in these countries. So that's the big opportunity which we have in our markets, and you can see selectively in markets like Kazakhstan, Pakistan, and Ukraine, we've been growing at double-digit growth rates still until even the end of the last year. So this market presents still with us with ample opportunities to grow from very simple, if you wish, services. If you look at the next page, that shows the, if you wish, the pent-up demand for the services which have been already exhausted in the developed markets. So here, the Western Europe is at 77% 4G penetration. We are still lingering much before. On average, we are about 35%. So we still have ample opportunity to grow. The same is very true about the machine-to-machine penetration. And the gap just shows the possibilities and the opportunities which we have, especially if we take some learnings of the Western Europe to be able to be on time to provide the services and the products which the customers actually want and are able to pay. So next page, again, repeating pretty much the same topic. So really the first pillar for us to grow, to continue to grow, is the basic demographics. As I said, 660 million people. In the next 3 years, there will be probably another 30 million people born and added to the overall pool of customers. Data penetration remains still quite low, and the internet penetration or digital service penetration remains still at around 38%, which even if it grows in the next 3 years to 60%, that's an additional 145 million subscribers which we can look at. The other topic which is very important for us is the financial services, especially in the markets in Asia and Africa. There's a very low penetration of the financial services, very low inclusion of the population in the banking sphere, and that gives us also an opportunity which I would like to then spend a couple of minutes going forward. So moving to the next slide, as I said, the 4G growth of the 4G penetration is the biggest driver which we're seeing now. Over the course of 1 year, we added about 20 million users on 4G, and that increased the penetration of 4G by about 10 percentage points. But we are still, as I said, about 35% vis-a-vis, let's say, Western Europe of about 77%. So we still have a very big possibility to grow purely by converting the low-end or 3G or even 2G in some cases for us subscribers into 4G customers. The arithmetics is very simple. The ARPU increase usually is double or even more And that is driven by a huge increase in the data consumption, which typically grows by about 2 to 4 times, and decreases the churn at the same time. So by converting the subscribers also to 4G, what we are securing is we're also securing a longer term value for subscribers, because that shows that subscribers typically stay with us longer, consume more data, and that drives, of course, the growth. Now, the key here from our point of view is that it is raw data which the customer is consuming. If we want to go further, we need to provide them with the so-called process data. So we need to have a shelf of services and the products to offer them. And then we need to have smart tariff plans, which will enable us to offer them, so to say, more for more tariff plans, where we can walk them through by increasing their consumption of the processed data, at the same time paying us more. And that's, we think, is the critical for us to maintain this growth momentum which we have at the moment. Now, going to the next page, I just wanted to focus on a couple of the initiatives which we have and a couple of the areas where we see the possible, so to say, divergence from maybe some of the trends we've seen in the developed markets. We look at the 3 main verticals in terms of the digital, building the digital businesses for us. One is the financial services, second one is content, and then it's a big data and ad tech. And of course, we have the B2B side as well. But starting with the financial services, as I said, I mean, many of the countries which we operate, typically in Asia or in Africa, have very low penetration of the banking services among the population. So here we have a company called Just Cash. This is the leading provider of the mobile financial services in Pakistan. It is actually offered the services over the smartphone using the data, but it's also very simply enabled through the USSD and the, so to say, the SMS, but by SMS as well. What are we offering here is we started, of course, from the money transfers. So it's a usual, so to say, route for a lot of these mobile financial services companies. But we developed it further, of course, into the payment, transaction services. We're signing up now merchants. And I think it is very important, especially at the time of COVID, when the disruptions to the business are very high. The government, for instance, in Pakistan, which wanted to disburse at some stage the payment or the cash to the population, they find the possibility of doing it seamlessly through the services like ours very, very important. So we think that this, and at the moment, about 15% of the subscribers which we have on our network are using the mobile wallets and mobile financial services. And I think this has a tremendous opportunity to grow into something much, much bigger. As I said, from the P2P transfers, we're going now and signing up the merchants. We want to create an ecosystem, and that is probably the same approach which Jio took in India, of course, more aggressively than us, at least at the moment. But we think that if we're succeeding here to create this cornerstone and core application, which is used by a very broad number of subscribers, we can add on a lot of other products and services for which the payment will be very simple, and that will create, so to say, the cornerstone application around which we can build the others and again foster and continue the growth. Now, on the content side, I'll give you another example later, but this is a product which has been launched less than 1 year ago in Bangladesh. It's called Toffee TV. It basically provides international, local, and even user-generated content. And we had tremendous success there. We had about 1.5 million monthly average users achieved in less than 1 year. And what it does also at the time of COVID, when I think this community disruption is happening, it gives the people more sense of the belonging, if you wish, because we populated with a lot of the locally generated content, as I said, user-generated content, and that had immediate traction with our customers. And not only our customers, actually, some of the customers which we have on Toffee product actually come from the networks, from other competitive networks as well. Moving to big data and ad tech, I think that's another area where we of course need to be within the legal framework of what we can share and how we can share in terms of the subscriber data. But we are very much exploring the possibilities of working with the advertisers. And the growth we've seen, for instance, in Russia was tremendous on the side. 70% and 50% using the big data, AI, and effectively working with the corporates who are interested in disseminating or reaching out with their product and services information to our customers. All needs to be, of course, done in a very careful legal framework, but it is something which we are actively developing, mostly in more advanced markets like Russia. And again, I'll give you a couple of examples here too. Now, on the B2B side, unlike again Western Europe, the B2B revenues for us in general, apart from Russia probably, which stands out at more than 10%, are somewhere below 5%, never of the total revenues. Nevertheless, we see, of course, big demand from the enterprises for cloud services. And we think that the way here is again, is to work with the cloud hyperscalers, to also work with the other providers, mostly as partnerships. Partnerships we find to be quite tricky. And I think what we want to do in these partnerships is that to make sure that the both partners actually invest into the JV, so that we can actually benefit together rather than provide just the platform for some of the partners to work off, so to say, work off our network. I think that's probably a less sustainable partnership compared to the partnership which is driven by actual joint investment into a product and a service. If we go to the next page, just quick couple of examples more. Again, even in such well penetrated by content markets such as is Russia, which doesn't have any, so to say, lack of different providers from Netflix to the local content providers. What we found here is a little niche where we offer the local, more local, if you wish, services. We also offer the combination of the linear TV and video on demand. We offer our customers flexibility, which is the seamless access across all the screens. And I think what importantly is here is that we use again the big data and recommendation engine to provide something which is relevant to our customers. Now, 2.5 million monthly average users actually translate in more than 12% to almost 15% our subscriber base, which means that while it might not be a novel product itself, it's mostly aggregation. It seems that we're offering the value to subscribers by this, having this recommendation engine, which does work. And the subscribers are, for that, subscribers are clearly able to pay extra. Moving to the next page, we have also in Russia 2 other products. Russia is also very well penetrated in terms of the banking services. So what kind of niche we can play here? Well, again, we do customer scoring. So on the customer scoring side, we do it actually very well. So that's a product which we offer through different banks, but we also have partnerships. For instance, with one of the banks, we have a co-branded credit card. And for every 5 issued, 1 is a co-branded credit card, where we do have profit sharing. Then the profit sharing also comes in digital lending, once we work with this bank through the credit scoring mechanism which we provide on our customers. So that's another source of the revenues. It's fairly low, but I would say that this is another area where even in a market where there is quite a good product mix, we can still add value and create some niches for us to grow. The other product is the partnership with one of the key retailers in Russian market, X5. This company has about 250 stores across Russia, about 300,000 unique visitors a day. Some of them, or at least a third of them probably are our subscribers or our customers. We have again an agreement with our customers who want to share the data about their history of the purchases with the advertisers or the users of the product. And once the customer is actually moving through the rows shopping, it can get online, real-time discounts on certain products, which usually he consumes or she consumes. And that's a product which works well. We of course charge the advertisers for that, we're getting an additional stream of the revenues, and we're clearly providing some value for the customer, which they appreciate. Now on to the maybe a couple of final remarks, and that's next slide. Now, first of all, we've seen probably over the past 12 months quite unprecedented activity in the infrastructure market and the tower market. So a lot of the integrated operators have been spinning off the towers and selling them out. Now, from my point of view, towers by itself is a growing business and can be kept. But since we are focusing here mostly on the mobile network operators, let's assume that we're not talking about the towers here. The money goes, I think, not only into the deleveraging, but I think because we're moving slowly but surely from competing on the quality of the networks to competing on the variety and the attractiveness of specific products and services to our customer, this is, I think, where the money should be going to develop exactly those better products and better services, which allow us to have a better engagement and a longer engagement with our customers. The other trend we see is, of course, that there is more regulation of the big tech coming. There's also a focus, an increased focus, at least in our countries, on the sovereignty of data and the customer information protection. And I think that telcos can play a good role here. It's like a trusted guardians of the sensitive data, which they can offer to the regulators, and also of course, a good credential management of the customer data, which they can offer on top of that. So I think that's a niche which needs to be explored, especially given the specifics of our markets as well. I mentioned already that the regulation has been very aggressive in terms of aiming, so to say, on telco companies to protect mostly the customer rights. But I think if we go forward, I think the regulation should also maybe turn a bit and tilt a bit against the predatory pricing, with the understanding that we cannot, as telco companies, continue providing good services and good products if the investment cycle of investing into new technology shrinks. We need to invest more. We need to also have some sort of a downside protection. So I think that's another thing maybe to to explore, so to say, going forward. But to the topics which I think are key, at least for us in terms of our growth, is to continue this championing the development and the variety of the products and services which are tailored to the needs of the consumer. So we see ourselves to becoming some sort of a digital concierge for the customer, providing them the host of the services. And for some of the services which are ours, we of course charge for this unique experience. One of them could be, for instance, financial services in Pakistan, which has a possibility to develop and evolve more into something like an ecosystem. For the others, we can continue to aggregate, but we could charge for simplifying choices via good recommendation engines. So we think that these two areas where we can either charge for uniqueness of our products or uniqueness of the additional add-on service which we offer on the aggregation are the ways to go forward. The same is true probably for on the B2B side. At least that's how we see it. The aggregation and integration of the services to drive the change in the industrial demand of data. And there, as I said, we see partnerships, especially on a JV basis, which involves also actually putting down the money and investing into something which has sustainability and longevity. I think also is the way to go. So at the end, I would just finish it saying that we still think that knowing the customer, managing its credentials is at the heart of our strategy to grow. And I think it's critical to know what the customer wants. It should be a very customer-centric model, which we're developing and developed in VEON, and we'll continue focusing on it. And we think that that can continue bringing us some of the growth over the next couple of years. That will be a short wrap, probably, from where we stand, at least in VEON, on VEON side. Thank you.
That was really interesting, Alex. Thank you. Huge amount of information and some great insights. We have some questions for you. One of our audience asks, what is your biggest obstacle when talking about a customer experience value?
Well, the biggest obstacle for the customer experience value is that I think the telco brand, despite the fact that it's a ubiquitous, everybody knows about it, but everybody kind of thinks of it as a given. And if you look at the brands which are recognizable by the customers, it's always the OTT players and not the telco companies. So I think that the biggest obstacle for us to create value is that to indeed make sure that the customer understands that we can also bring a combined value rather than just very specific value which a specific application brings to them. So we can be, some to say, as I said, an aggregator and a conduit of the services which the customer wants, and filter it and bring it to them. But the obstacle would be fairly low brand recognition and believe that we can actually do that.
Okay. Do you think the pandemic, I know in many markets, I think a lot of people have suddenly woken up to what the telcos do and how important it is. Would you say that's been your experience in your markets?
Absolutely, and I think the really key example is, again, for instance, Pakistan, where at some stage the lockups just happened almost overnight, and that created two problems. One problem is that a lot of people are, well, first of all, the earning power of Pakistani population is quite low. But if you are out of credit, what you need to do is you need to actually walk to a store and top up your your prepaid card. Excuse me. Now, this is completely unnecessary, of course, if you have a mobile financial services application and you can actually transfer the credit from one person to another person. And I think that exposed the possibility which we can offer purely through the mobile phone to make those transfers and to make sure that your close relatives are not suffering by the fact that they are completely cut off the world because they don't have a credit and they cannot go out. The second element was also the Pakistani government wanted to provide cash, so to say, cash outs to the population, to the most needy ones. And of course, two issues there. Cash is dirty by definition. And secondly, you actually need to go out and collect it. Same here. I think Pakistani government also realized how important those services are. And we are actually working now very closely to the government to actually foster quicker development of this product line.
Interesting. Another question from our audience is, how much prospect of IoT development is there in East Asia in the near future?
Good question. I think the answer is it depends where East Asia. If we look at our countries, which is Pakistan and Bangladesh, I would say fairly low. An unfortunate answer to that is probably a very low wages of the population working there. So there's two probably sides of that. One is that if you develop the, so to say, the IoT-based smart robots or whatever in the factories, and for instance, Bangladesh is a key garment, they have a key garment industry which is providing garments worldwide. What will that achieve is that, one, it's probably not going to be much cheaper for the employer to deploy, so to say, advanced technology and then substitute people with the robots, given again where the wages are. But secondly, the government may not like that either, because you create a big problem for the government by creating bigger unemployment. So I think on that very basic, so to say, level, I think the IoT should be concentrated on fleet management, the most simple, so to say, M2M type businesses, rather than anything more sophisticated. So I don't know if that gives the answer, but I think I would say fairly limited, I would say, at the moment.
Okay, and our final question is, the financial market in East Asia is not small, but AI is not growing as expected. So I think the question is about how can AI be explored more to develop the financial services?
Well, I mean, I think we're almost, as I said, I mean, we're probably not there yet still. I mean, as I said, I mean, we're still at the very early stages of the financial service penetration growth for some of the markets. So I would say AI is probably maybe another 5 years away from us, but it will be explored. Of course, we need to have more robust systems, from just using the big data and trying to really understand, so to say, the customer needs and customer profiling, and that probably will bring in more sophisticated technologies like AI as well into the domain. But at the moment, I would still say that we're probably some way behind that.
Interesting, thank you. And interesting that I think, like most telcos who are a little way down the line with AI, the first target, I think, for all of them has been customers and customer experience. So interesting that you think that's going to be your first line of approach as well.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
Alex, thank you so much. That was really interesting.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.